Long ago, in a small village, there was a sacred law no one dared to break. You could swim in the river during the day, but at night the river was forbidden. People could fetch water in the evening, but no one was allowed to swim after dusk. The elders said it was sacred and strange things would happen to anyone who ignored the rule. Ola, Ugoma and Annie were best friends who loved swimming more than anything. Every chance they got, they would run to the river, splashing and diving until they were exhausted. One afternoon, the three friends were having so much fun that they didn't notice the sky turning orange, then fading to gray as the sun began to set. The other villagers had long left, returning home before dark, but the girls, caught up in their laughter and games, didn't realize they were alone. It wasn't until they heard a strange rustle in the trees that they looked around and noticed the darkening sky.
It's getting late.
Annie whispered, feeling a chill creep over her. Just as she spoke, Ola let out a startled cry. Her hand slipped below the water and she disappeared with barely a ripple.
Where's Ola?
Ugoma gasped, her heart pounding. He called her name, frantically searching the water, but Ola was gone. The river was silent. The girls' hearts sank as they remembered the village's rule. They weren't supposed to be swimming this late. The river was sacred after dark. Panic gripped them. Without a second thought, they scrambled out of the water, running home as fast as their legs could carry them. Back at their houses, Annie and Ugoma didn't breathe a word about what had happened. Their minds spun with guilt, fear, and worry. They couldn't bring themselves to admit to anyone, not even Ola's family, that they had seen her vanish. The next morning, the village buzzed with worry. Ola's parents had searched everywhere and called out her name, but there was no sign of their daughter. When they questioned Ugoma and Annie, the girls lied, saying they hadn't seen Ola for days. They couldn't bring themselves to speak the truth, terrified of the consequences. Days turned into weeks. Ola's mother cried constantly, her heart breaking over the loss of her only child. She couldn't eat, and slowly her health faded. Ola's father did everything he could to comfort her, but one tragic day she passed away from grief. Ola's father was left alone, devastated, and began visiting the river daily, pleading with the gods to return his daughter. One evening, an old fisherman named Okafor was casting his net in the river. As he pulled it back, it felt heavier than ever before. His heart leaped with excitement, thinking he had caught the biggest fish of his life. But when he pulled the net up, he saw a pale, lifeless young girl tangled in it. It was Ola. Okafor rushed to the shore, gently laying Ola down. Her skin was cold, her eyes closed, and she looked as though she had been lost for ages. Okafor, who knew herbal medicine, took her home and carefully treated her, trying to bring her back to life. Days passed, and he worried she would never wake. But on the third day, Ola suddenly sneezed. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked around, dazed.
Are you alright?
Okafor asked gently, offering her food and water. She ate, but something was wrong. Her eyes looked distant, as if she was seeing a world no one else could. When he asked her name and where she came from, she stared blankly, unable to remember anything. Meanwhile, Ugoma and Annie were overwhelmed by guilt. They had kept the truth hidden for so long, and now they could hardly sleep, haunted by dreams of Ola and the night at the river. One morning, they couldn't bear it any longer. They gathered their courage and went to Ola's father. We have to tell you something, Ugoma said, her voice trembling. With tears in their eyes, the girls confessed to everything: how they had stayed too late, how Ola had disappeared, and how they had run home in terror. Ola's father's face twisted with grief and anger.
Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe she was gone forever?
He shouted, his voice breaking. Before he could say anything else, they noticed an old man and a young girl walking toward them from afar. As they drew closer, the girls gasped. It was Ola. Okafor gently explained how he had found her in his fishing net and cared for her, doing everything he could to bring her back to life. She woke up, he said, but she doesn't seem to remember anything, not even her name. Ola's father rushed forward, his heart swelling with joy and sorrow. "Ola!" he cried, reaching for his daughter. But Ola stared at him with empty eyes, not a flicker of recognition on her face. She couldn't remember her friends, her father, or anything about the village she had grown up in. As her father held her close, his tears mixing with her blank gaze, he whispered, "Your mother would have given anything to see you like this, if only she were still here." The girls, seeing the pain their action had caused, vowed never to break another sacred rule. Understanding at last the true power and mystery of the river, the village learned of Ola's return, but everyone knew she would never truly be the same. And in time, whenever they passed by the river at dusk, they would whisper a quiet prayer, remembering the girl who had once been lost to its dark depths.